Hello and welcome to our attendees. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's program is part of the Presidential Primary Sources Project, and our program today is Lou Henry Hoover, Challenging Convention Since 1898. It is being presented to us today by Bridget Nash. She's an education specialist with the Hoover Presidential Library and Museum. The Presidential Primary Sources Project is a collaboration between Internet2, the National Archives, and the National Park Service. It's a free series presented every year from January through April.
Hey, Robin, people in the chat are saying they cannot see your screen.
How is that possible? Let's see. I am screen sharing.
Oh, Providence says they see it. Oh, and
Okay.
Cahaba Conservatory says they can now too.
Okay. Thank you for that, Bridget. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, they can see us.
No, they're not going to see us
Oh,
yet.
that's a shame. Sorry, guys.
No, once we stop sharing, it'll be fine. Okay, just a reminder today, quick reminder that by participating today, you are agreeing to be recorded and archived because we keep all of our recordings of all of our programs on our YouTube channel so that teachers and students can access them later. Okay, now go ahead and share with us where you're joining us from, if you don't mind, in the chat. And if you would like, you can be seen on video. If you're interested in being seen on video, just leave a message in the chat and I will put you up on the screen. Okay. Teachers and students, we encourage you to participate today. Please pull up the chat box and enter any comments or questions there. This is the easiest way to ask questions today. We absolutely want you to participate. Bridget's got a fantastic program set up for you, and your interaction is more fun and your learning experience more valuable when you participate. All right. We ask, though, that you be respectful of our interactive tools. Please make sure your questions and comments are related to her presentation. Okay. Again, thank you for joining us today. We're glad to have you. One note, we've been having some Zoom issues Thursday and today. So if for some reason Zoom kicks you off, please try going out of Zoom altogether and reloading it and then joining us. Some of our participants have gotten a message saying they can't rejoin because the host is in another meeting. That's the key to get out and then come back in because it's an open link. You should be able to come and go as you need to. So if that happens, just get out of Zoom altogether and then come back in, rejoin us that way if you don't mind. All right. This slide has our website if you're interested in more information about our program or you're looking for links to our recording or any other information on our program, just click there or go to that website. Great. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that Bridget can begin her program. Thank you, Bridget.
You are welcome. Okay, friends, I just want to make sure that you can see the screen in front of you. You should see a photo of Lou Henry Hoover. You should also see, it'll say Lou Henry Hoover conventions, challenging conventions since 1898. And my chat has disappeared here. I am
You
trying.
can see it.
There we go. Okay, so we got a yes from Providence. Okay, if at any time you cannot see the screen, please just put it in the chat and we'll make sure to get that remedied, okay? All right, so let's get going. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about Lou Henry Hoover, okay? So a little bit about me. My name is Bridget Nash. I am the education specialist here at the Hoover Presidential Library and Museum. And we are located in West Branch, Iowa. Okay. And so here's the library that you see on the screen. We are located, and I see we have Texas, Alabama, South Dakota. And if you haven't, go ahead and drop in the chat where you're from. Perhaps some of you have been to Iowa before, and perhaps some of you have just seen it on a map. Well, this little star right here is where we are located. West Branch is just outside of Iowa City. We're south of Cedar Rapids. This river right here is the Mississippi River. So we are about 45 minutes from the Mississippi River. Um, and I get a lot of questions about why we're in West Branch, because a lot of people expect the presidential library and museums to be in larger cities. And it's because of this guy right here. This is Herbert Hoover, and he was the 31st president of the United States. So West Branch is where he was born, and where he spent some of his childhood. And so that's why we are situated. We are actually, his birthplace cottage is right outside. So that's really cool to see. And both he and Lou Henry Hoover are buried here as well. Okay. So before we get started, okay, because today we are not only going to explore the life of Lou Henry Hoover, but also the time in which she lived. So because she saw this dramatic change in women's roles and status during her lifetime. So before we get started, I want to go over some terminology that you might hear or that you might even see on some of the documents that I'll be sharing with you. The first one is gender roles. Okay. And if you want to, if you want, okay, nobody is on camera. So just drop in the chat. What do you think I mean when I say gender role? What is a gender role? What might that mean? Okay. Okay. So we're getting some answers. Okay. And so the answers I've received so far are all kind of like what's expected, right? And you're exactly right. So gender roles are what's considered appropriate for men or women by society, right? Like men should work or women should take care of the children. They sometimes they're a little bit stereotypical, right? But these are those roles that we expect men and women to fulfill. What about suffrage? Oh, I already felt it. Okay, a suffragist is somebody who advocates that voting for all people. Now, let's take a look at universal suffrage. Okay, some of you may have not heard that term before, but you'll see it on a document that I share with you here later. What is universal suffrage? Hmm, any thoughts? Ooh, voting rights. Okay. Ooh, okay, good, very good, Creek House. Universal suffrage is voting rights, okay, building on Providence, for everybody, right? For all citizens, regardless if you're male, female, regardless of your race and ethnicity. What about women's suffrage? Exactly. Okay, perfect. You all did that really well. It's the right of women to vote. Now, activist. What is an activist? Because sometimes people will use suffragist and activist interchangeably. And Lou herself has been called an activist. So what does that mean? What is an activist? Oh, okay. People that go out there and fight for people's rights. Okay. Yeah, very good. Okay. So an activist is someone who tries to bring about political or social change. Very good. So, who is Lou Henry Hoover? Now, I want you to drop in the chat um, a word or two. If you are familiar with Lou Henry Hoover, use a word or two to describe, to tell me what you know about her already. And if you don't know who she is, that is okay. What do you know about Lou Henry Hoover? Maybe nothing at all, and that is okay. Oh, okay. Yes. She is the wife of Herbert Hoover. Very good. And yes, she is the first lady, the 31st. Good. All right, I love it. Okay, I do enjoy being able to share all kinds of really fun things with you about Lou Henry Hoover. You guys did a great job. She is the wife of Herbert Hoover. She is also a first lady, but a majority of what we're going to talk about comes before they even enter the Oval Office. Okay, because they actually did a lot. And as you're going to see, Lou is this really dynamic, multifaceted woman, meaning she's very complex. She's interested in a lot and she does a lot. So let's get started. Okay. Because remember, today, as we move through our discussion, okay, so we're going to be talking about Lou, right? Her life, her legacy, but I'm also going to be weaving in primary source information about the women's suffrage movement because it's all happening around the same time. Okay. And we're going to try and answer these questions about Lou herself utilizing these primary source documents. So, first things first, before I talk to you about these questions, who can tell me what is a primary source? What is it that we're going to be looking at? What am I going to share with you? What is a primary source? So you can list types, or you can just tell me what a primary source is. Ooh, okay. Original document for research. Okay. Yes. So primary sources are original records or objects. So the records can be like a letter, they can be photographs, they can be video. Okay. So these are original records or objects that are created at the time the event took place. Okay. So I'm going to share several original records with you, a lot of primary sources in the form of um, photographs, well, legislation, papers, video. Okay, so I'll be sharing a lot of those with you so that you can try and answer these questions. One being, was Lou a suffragist? Was she supportive of women's suffrage? Now, I will tell you, because some of you will say, well, why wouldn't she be? She's female. Well, you know what? Not all women were supportive of women's suffrage, as you can see in this letter here from a woman here in Iowa on behalf of the Iowa Association opposed to women's suffrage. She goes into great detail talking about why women shouldn't have the right to vote. So not all women were supportive of women's suffrage. Okay. And that's why I have this question up here. Next, did Lou benefit from the women's suffrage movement? And finally, was Lou an activist? And these are all questions that researchers have posed and that have been tried to answer. Some have, well, I'm not going to tell you what they've said because I do not want that to um, bias you in any particular way. Okay. I want you to look at the primary source documents and the history and make your own decisions. I'll tell you at the end. Okay. So here we go. So before Lou was born, okay, so Lou was born in 1874, but we're going to set the stage, okay? I want you, or let's talk about what's happening. Do any of you know what is happening in the late 1800s, around this time period here in America? What's going on? Okay, we've come out of the Civil War. Okay, what is going on? Okay. Railroads are being built. Okay. Any other guesses? And remember, it is okay to guess. Even if you don't know, if you just want to take a guess, that is fine. Okay, so far we have railroads being built. Yeah, we did like about 10 years between 1874 and into Civil War. Yep, good. Okay, so let's set the stage here. Okay, so around the time of Lou's birth, okay, so right before Lou was born and when she was born, we're seeing this shift from people working on their farms, okay, to working in factories. Okay, so there's this rapid growth of factories and manufacturing, as well as mentioned before, the building of the railroad like system, as well as the use of steam engines. And because factories were largely concentrated in cities, we start to see this large migration of people from these rural communities where they're working on their farms to the cities. And because of this, we start to see um, an overcrowding issue taking place because there's inadequate housing and then there becomes sanitation issues. We also see labor issues. Okay, we start to see this significant wealth gap take place where you have within this industrial boom where you have those wealthy industrialists who are creating these factories, who are building them, who are running them, and then the working class, which leads to a lot of issues, the development of unions. So when all of this is taking place, right, alongside all these labor issues, we start to see the movement for the women's suffrage and social justice. They're starting to pick up momentum, right? They're starting to gain momentum. Now, here's my question for you. What do you think were those gender roles or those expectations of women at this time? Okay, late 1800s. What do you think those gender roles or those expectations of women were at this time? Okay, taking care of kids, be mothers, good. Cooking, very good. Okay. Yeah, the rules of women at this time were largely limited to the house, right? Cleaning, cooking, taking care of the kids, sewing, all of those things. And for those women who were able to work outside the home, they were limited to teaching, okay, because women started to replace men as teachers largely starting around this time, nursing, and then domestic work. Um, by and large, women needed to be prim and proper. Okay. At this time as well. So you see these photos on the screen. Those are primary source for the factories and the urbanization at those times. But I want you to take a look at this document. It says a petition for universal suffrage. Okay. Because now we're starting to see, and you may be familiar with the two names I'm going to drop here in a second, Elizabeth Cody Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. Okay. Those two women um, this is where we're starting to see that movement gaining, okay? Because before Lou was born, Elizabeth Cody Stanton, she had already organized the first convention for women's rights in Seneca Falls in 1848. And almost 20 years later, there's this petition that you see on your screen. This is from 1866, and this is a petition for universal suffrage that was submitted to both the Senate and the House of Representatives, asking for an amendment to the Constitution, allowing all citizens the same rights. And you see some of the signatures there as well. And then 3 years later, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cody Stanton joined forces and they found the National Women's Suffrage Association. Now, Lou, who you see here on the screen in this picture, she was born March 29th, 1874 in Waterloo, Iowa. So Bert was born here in West Branch. Waterloo is about 2 hours north of where we're at. So while they come together later in life, they did not know each other here in Iowa. Okay. But as a child here in Iowa, Lou often spent a majority of her days outdoors. She loved to fish. She loved to identify rocks and plants, go ice skating, sledding in the wintertime. She loved to organize baseball games, climb trees, go on camping trips. In fact, her father even taught her how to trap rabbits when they would go on their camping trips. Now, when Lou was 11 years old, the family left Iowa for California. Her father was a banker and he went out there to establish a new bank. And so they eventually landed in Monterey, California, where he started his bank. But Lou's love for the outdoors continued. She loved, yes, to answer your question there, Creek House. Oh, no, is just Lou Henry. Um, but here you see, she is on a burro or a donkey, and she has her rifle. This photo was taken when she was in um, Monterey, California, because after they moved, she still enjoyed the outdoors and she became really, really interested in the local history, particularly with the tribes, as well as the architecture of the town. And you'll see that come back into play later in life. Now, going back to women's suffrage here, in 1878, over here, you see the petition for women's suffrage. Okay. So the Women's Suffrage Amendment was first introduced to Congress in 1878. And we will see this resurface later. Okay. But the other letter I want to share with you here is a letter written by Herbert Hoover's mother, Huldah Hoover, to her sister. Now, as any, if you've ever gotten on the phone to talk to like your grandparents or other family members, or perhaps you send out Christmas cards, they're largely, hey, guess what's happening with the family? Guess what we're doing? So there's a lot of that in there. But the part that I blew up, and it's written in cursive, so you may not be able to read it. But the part that I blew up is a part in which Huldah starts telling her sister about the women's suffrage meeting that she had attended. And she states, I need only to say, let a woman be left a widow and have anything to do with business, and she will emphatically be on the side of equal suffrage. Now, for those of you who don't know the term emphatically, it just means to be really excited, right? So, what do you think President Hoover's mother thought of universal suffrage? Was she for it or was she against it? Let a woman be left a widow and have anything to do with business, and she will emphatically be on the side of equal suffrage. So, what do you think? Drop it in the chat. Do you think she was for or against women's suffrage? Okay, so Creek House says for. Okay, so we do. I'm getting a lot of fours. Okay, so do you think his mother's position on women's suffrage had any influence on Herbert Hoover and how he viewed women and their roles? Okay, getting a lot of yeses. And I ask this simply because, and you made those of you that are saying yes, I have a couple saying I'm not sure, which is fine. Those of you that are saying yes, I would probably agree because certainly as you're going to learn about Lou is she is very unconventional for this particular time, and so maybe this makes him more receptive to her views and opinions. Now, on this slide, so I'm not sure if any of you are around the age of 14, okay? And this is the age we're going to be talking at about Lou right now. Okay. She's 14 years old. She wrote two essays, two school essays, one called Universal Suffrage, the other was called The Independent Girl. Okay. Now, the first page of her Universal Suffrage document is right here. Okay. And again, cursive and it's on a screen, so it may be difficult to read, but I'm going to pull out three sections that I want us to discuss. Okay. The first one, she says, I do not, however, fail to realize the vast importance of this matter, universal suffrage. To be classed far below the roughest, least intelligent scamp can by no means be overlooked. Okay. Now, right before that particular sentence that I pulled out, she was talking about um, how she's not sure how women's suffrage would change her life. She's questioning, she's not quite sure what's going on. Okay, but then she's changing as she goes on. She says, many of the uses of the ballot make but little difference with a woman. What does she care who becomes county clerk? But there are other matters which influence her in more ways, yet in which she has no voice whatever. And she goes on to say, oops, that one missed the mark there. Sorry about that. There we go. It is with some feeling of respect that we can point to some states whose senators and representatives have been honorable enough to acknowledge the right of universal suffrage. So, based on what you know about Lou so far in her childhood and her essay on universal suffrage, those three parts that I pulled out, how do you think Lou views women's suffrage? Do you think this is something she's for, like she finds favorable? Do you think she's against it? Or do you think she doesn't really think either way? Okay. So I have a couple of fours, and then I have one who says she doesn't really care, doesn't seem to care one way or the other. Okay. And just remember, as we go through, and this is what happens when you do research, right? Your opinion, your thoughts on what is like the question I just asked you, because I'm going to ask it a lot as we move through, it can change based on new information that you discover, right? Okay. So let's take a look at these pictures. This first picture, you see her, she's doing archery. Okay. She again loves shooting sports. She has rifles, she has pistols, she has bows and arrows, loves to go out, loves to do shooting sports. But this other photo over here is taken of her at Stanford University. So Lou, at the age of 19 in 1893, she received her teaching certificate from San Jose Normal School, which is today known as California State University. Okay. But after she heard a lecture from a geology professor from Stanford University, a couple years later, she decided to enroll in Stanford University to study geology. And not only was Lou the first woman in her class, but she also the first woman when she graduated in 1898. She was the first woman in Stanford's history to graduate with a degree in geology. How cool is that? Okay. Now, Stanford University is actually where, remember, they were both Bert and Lou were both born here in Iowa, okay? Did not know each other. They both ended up in California, and Stanford University is where they met because they were both studying geology. Now, shortly after, so like they get married, the day after, they leave for Tientsin, China. Okay, they're there for a little while. In the summer of 1900, there's this nationalist insurrection that arose against the colonial powers, like the mine Bert was overseeing. Okay, so the Boxers, there's this big siege that takes place. The Hoovers, along with hundreds of foreign families, they find themselves trapped in the city of Tientsin as the Boxers are closing in. Okay, and the photo that you see over here is a room in their house, and you see the mortar shell casings here that have, like, the mortars have hit the wall. So you see those. We actually have the casings in our collection of our museum. And while Bert, so everybody's trapped, while Bert is out there, he's out there helping to construct barricades. He's overseeing the food supplies. He's trying to organize the food supplies, making sure everybody has food. And he's also overseeing the operation of the water purification plant. Lou says, I'm going to help out too. So she would often go out and she would go to either volunteer at the hospital to help with the wounded, or she would go out hunting for food, clothing, medicine for those who needed it. And then you see this photo of her standing next to this cannon. Okay. And she would actually go out and stand guard at the barricades as needed as well. So this is taking place in China. Okay. And this was again 1900. Shortly after this, they moved to London, England. And while they're in London, England, this is what's taking place in the United States. Okay, so in 1913, March 3rd, 1913, to be precise, the day before the inauguration of President Woodrow Wilson, thousands of women marched in Washington, D.C. During the women's suffrage procession along the same route that the inaugural parade was take the next day. Okay, so that's the photo you see here. At the top of the screen, you will see the cover of the program for the National American Women's Suffrage Association procession. And this was actually edited by Harriet Connor Brown, who's not only a suffragist, but was born here in Burlington, Iowa. Okay, now back over to London, England. Okay, so that was happening. The procession was happening, Washington, D.C., 1913. A year later in London, England, the Hoovers are asked to undertake a monumental um, sorry, a monumental task of helping with World War One. Okay, so World War One breaks out. The Hoovers are in London, England. Herbert Hoover is asked to help out with aid for Belgium, to organize this aid for Belgium, who is facing imminent starvation because they're trapped between Germany and the British blockade. And so he heads what's comes to be known as the Commission for Belgium Relief. And while he's doing that, Lou takes their sons and moves back to California, where she starts a little branch of the CRB, the Commission for Belgium Relief, in California. So while she's there, in this middle photo here that you see of Lou Henry Hoover, um, this is the Belgium Relief Fair in California. She is out there trying to raise awareness of the war, trying to raise awareness of the need of people in Belgium and at this time in other countries. Um, Raise awareness, gather money for food, taking donations, so that she can buy food, get the food shipped over. So this is what you see in this photo here. You see flour sacks full of food. And so, um, again, Bert is over in England. He is, well, in Europe because he kind of moves around, heading the Commission for Belgium Relief over there, trying to get food through Germany to Belgium. for what they need, while Lou is in California, where she's raising money, facilitating the transportation of food. Again, remember they can't fly them on planes, so she's having to organize these on ships and get the boats of food to those who in need over in Europe. And at the same time, she's also encouraging widespread sale of both in London and in America of Belgian lace to support Belgium's primary industry during the war years. And that's the other photo you see. You see the two women there, you see some of the lace out on the table, and you see all these boxes. So what happens is in Belgium, women are making lace in the factories. The Commission for Belgium Relief is taking this lace out of the country and then getting it, shipping it to London, shipping it to America, where people are purchasing this lace. And then all of the money is going back through the Commission for Belgium Relief, or CRB, going back to the women in Belgium who are creating this so that they can support their families. On top of all of this, Lou also, because she's traveling back and forth between California and London, she becomes the organizer of the American Red Cross's Canteen Escort Service, which is arranging transportation home for wounded soldiers, creating a hospital center, complete with a fleet of ambulances. So there's a lot going on, and Lou's involved in a lot of this. Now, here's my question to you. Based on what you've learned about Lou so far, does she follow those gender roles or expectations for women at this time? What do you think? A lot of no's. Oh, Creek House, I see your question here. Were most of the activists who marched young, unmarried women, or were they married with kids? There was actually a decent mixture. I do not have statistics, but I do know some of the women who were involved, and they run in both. Some were married with kids, and some were unmarried, and then age-wise, it kind of spans. So you get a nice healthy mixture there. Good question. Okay. So now let's go to 1917. So remember, we were 1914, start of World War One. Okay, London, England, back into California with Lou, and she's going back and forth between London and California. Now this 1917, okay? The Hoovers are still not in office, right? So 1917, this letter that you see here on your screen, the first page here, this is a letter from Anne Martin, who's a former classmate of Lou's from Stanford University, and she's writing a letter to Lou. Okay, in this letter, and Anne is a suffragist, okay? In this letter, she's detailing an incident that took place at the White House where 16 suffragists were arrested and then sent to a workhouse for their picketing demonstration in front of the White House, which is the photo you see on the screen. The women, you see them in the white, they're carrying the banners there in the middle. Okay. Now, unfortunately, we don't have anything in our collection in way of a response to Anne. So it's possible Lou responded and we just don't have it. And it's also possible that Lou didn't respond. But we do have a letter from Lou to Anne the following year in 1918. And this letter comes just after Anne lost in her efforts to become the senator for Nevada. Okay. And you can see Lou's like, I'm sorry, you didn't win, part. But in this letter, Lou states, I cannot always feel that it would be best for the country if its course followed the direction you sometimes think wise. Now, Lou doesn't define, right? We don't have a lot of context. She doesn't define what she's talking about. But we know Anne is a suffragist. We know she ran to become a senator. We also know that when she was running for senator, she didn't really talk about her work with women's suffrage. But we also, so while we don't have the context of Lou's here, we do have another letter written from Lou that may provide a little more context. So let's take a look at that. This next letter, also written in 1918, just a couple days later, this is to Elizabeth Kent. Elizabeth Kent is a mutual friend of Lou's and Anne's, okay? And in this letter, Lou says a couple things that we're going to talk about really quickly. One is, I still feel that the trail you and Anne are on at the moment has some insurmountable obstacles in its way before it reaches or could reach the summit we are all aiming for. What do you think Lou's talking about? What do you think she might be saying when she says the summit we are all aiming for? Again, we don't have a lot of context. We don't know what Lou's talking about. But we do know that both Anne and Elizabeth are suffragists. So, and she's talking about insurmountable obstacles before reaching the goal. So yeah, a couple of you said maybe women's suffrage could be. Okay. So let's go on to see what else she says. She says, I really believe that if Anne had gone to the state with the direct principles and stories she stood for in the suffrage campaign, she would have won out. So in this quote, she says, I believe if Anne had shared her principles, had shared her work with where she stood with the women's suffrage campaign, she would have won that Senate seat. Where do you think Lou stands on women's suffrage? Do you think she's for women's suffrage? Do you think she's against it? Where do you think she stands now, given everything that you know about Lou? As well as these letters, where do you think she stands? Okay, quite a few of you are saying that you think she's for women's suffrage. Okay, all right. Let's, we already did that. Now, in 1918, okay, so those letters in 1918, so there's a lot of things that are going to be happening all at the same time right now. We have those conversations. Anne just ran for Senate. She's a suffragist. She lost. There are those conversations between Lou and Anne and Lou and Elizabeth Kent, all of who are friends, okay? At the same time, we have President Woodrow Wilson, who is he does a speech before Congress in 1918 where he, for the very first time um, in office, he is publicly endorsing the women's right to vote because he realizes that women are needed as a war measure during World War One. Remember those factories we talked about earlier? Okay, as men are heading off because we have now entered World War One, right? So we need people to be working in these factories and doing things. However, unfortunately, his words didn't gather the necessary votes from the Senate to pass the amendment that we saw previously. Okay. So let's talk about these three things. We're back to Lou. Okay. So the late teens, early 20s, right? So we have a lot of things happening. We had those conversations with her friends. We have President Wilson, 1918, his speech. Then we also have Lou doing several things before we go back to President Wilson. So one of those is Girl Scouts. And now, if any of you are a Girl Scout, have been, still are a Girl Scout, you are familiar with some of the Girl Scout history, including its founder, Juliette Gordon Low. Well, she met, so 5 years after creating the Girl Scout, she meets Lou, and she is struck by Lou's tenacity, the fact that Lou loves to be outdoors, that she loves to go out and explore the natural world. So she recruits Lou into the Girl Scout organization. So Lou begins her work with the Girl Scouts in 1917 as a national commissioner and eventually becomes president and troop leader to two troops, one in California and one in Washington, D.C., where she includes girls from all races and ethnicities, which was extremely rare to see during this time. Now, at this time, Lou is also strongly advocating for girls to experience the love of the outdoors. Okay. Because at this time, Girl Scouts is largely focusing on homemaking. And Lou comes in and is just like, well, they need to go outdoors too. So she starts, advising other Girl Scout leaders to use camping as an educational tool for not only for nature like studies, but also map making skills. And she would also often take her troops on hikes and take them camping. And then in 1920, and there's this quote that I have on here. She gives a talk to students at a luncheon at Bryn Mawr College. Okay, these are college students. And in her talk, she's not only discussing recent increases in living expenses that they're facing, but she also talks to them about the right to vote. Okay. And then over here, you see her membership card to the NAAF. So in 1922, Lou is named the vice president of the National Amateur Athletic Association and is the only woman on the board. And she joined the association board with the intention of expanding to women its message of physical and mental value of athletics, right? And a year into being on this board, Lou, again, strong advocate for physical fitness for women and girls, helps found and is the president, serves as the president of the women's division, where she's fighting a lot of issues. The main one being that women were not allowed to join in sporting competitions like the Olympics. So, any athletes out there, any female athletes in particular, um, because of Lou and her efforts, you're in a position now where you can go out and you can compete in sports. And Lou is also fighting for more sport facilities and trainers and coaches for women. At the same time, remember, 1918, President Wilson went before Congress and was talking to them about women's suffrage. He didn't get the votes, but he continued to have conversations with members of Congress about women's suffrage. And on June 4th, 1919, the 19th Amendment, which was originally written by Susan B. Anthony and introduced in Congress in 1878, remember all those slides ago, was passed by the House of Representatives and the Senate. Once that was passed, it was sent to the individual states for ratification. Took almost a year, but on August 26, 1920, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, which granted women the right to vote, was signed into law. Okay. At the same time, okay, like I said, a lot of stuff happening. So that was 1920. We saw Lou being very, very active with women's athletics in 1922. She becomes the first lady. So we're moving into the White House at this point. She becomes the first lady of the United States on March 4th, 1929, when her husband, Herbert Hoover, is inaugurated as the 31st president of the United States. Now, while the role of the first lady required Lou to restrict some activities or to subdue them, she continued her belief in the equality of women and men. And even, you see the quote in the middle, she gave an address in 1929 to a 4-H club, which was broadcast on NBC, where she talks about the fact that housework was for men too, that boys should learn to clean the house and wash the dishes along with girls because they were just as great factors in the homemaking of the family as are the girls. Okay. She also continued her belief that education is the key to long term and permanent success for women by paying entirely for their higher education. Okay. This is something she started before she became First Lady, and it continued. So here are on the screen two thank you letters, and we have a bunch of them in our archives. One of them is thank you. She received her engineer degree. The other one went to Stanford. And so what I have been told is after Lou passed away, the family was going through her belongings and they would open up drawers and it would be full of these letters, including checks of women who were trying to repay the debt of the generosity of Lou paying for the college. And she read the letters, and we know she read the letters because we have the response to several of them where she responded, following up on their degree, their careers, their families. Um, but she didn't cash the checks. So in there are these letters, but there are also these checks that she just never bothered to cash, that women were using to repay her. So let's talk. I know we only have so much time left. So let's talk about these questions that we from the get-go. Okay. So was Lou a suffragist? Remember, a suffragist is a person who advocates for voting to be extended to more people. Would you say Lou is a suffragist? Yes or no? And it's okay if you're on the fence. That's okay. Okay, quite a few yeses. One is not quite sure, and that's okay. All right. Was she supportive of women's suffrage? What do you think? Okay. Across the board yeses for women's suffrage. Now, here's the major distinction, okay? Remember, suffragist is somebody who's out there advocating. Was she advocating? Was she out there in the processions? Was she signing petitions? Was she trying to get things changed? Or was she just on the sidelines supporting the efforts? Okay, so that's the difference between those two questions. Good, but hands down, I agree with everybody across the board. She's definitely supportive, right? Did she benefit from the women's suffrage movement? How did she benefit? I have saying yes to she's benefited. How did she benefit from the women's suffrage movement? What do you think? I mean, she was pretty unconventional, right? At the time, she was doing things that were outside of what was expected for girls and women of the time. Yes, she did. She did get the right to vote, right? She could, yes, very good. All right. Would you say she's an activist? Remember, an activist is someone who tries to bring about political or social change. Would you classify Lou as an activist? Okay, several yeses, seeing several yeses again. And this is one, and this is why I started researching this because there is a researcher who classified Lou as the first lady activist. And so I wanted to delve into that and do some research on my own. Um, to see if that was true. And so that's where this particular conversation came from. And remember, Lou Henry Hoover she saw this dramatic change in women's roles and their status over her lifetime. When she was young, women couldn't vote. And they didn't have that right, and girls weren't supposed to engage in sports or major in geology. But despite this, Lou led an unusual life from childhood, one in which she participated in unconventional activities for women, from outdoor activities like archery and shooting guns to majoring in geology at a university, writing books, traveling the world where she would go into mines and she helped build barricades during sieges. But one thing didn't waver. What one it was Lou's belief that women could do anything, right? She didn't really put much thought into it. She did what she wanted to do. And this is her evident, like, her belief is evident in the fact that she provided assistance in paying for women to attend college. She moved Girl Scouts outside of that homemaker role and took them outdoors, right? And she fought for women's sports, for the ability to be able to participate, for the proper facilities and people to help women, in mentoring them in their sport, as well as them being able to compete. And a lot of this took place before women had that right to vote, right? So there is a lot that she did during her time. Now I have a bonus slide for you and we'll see. Fingers crossed. I'm hoping the sound works. So the Hoovers, while they were in office, so they had it's called Camp Rapidan, located in Dark Hollow, Virginia. So they built this while they were in office. And he would go out there, they would go out to horseback and fish and kind of relax from the presidential duties. Well, while they were out there, President Hoover met a local boy by the name of Ray. He was trying to sell him a possum. And in conversation, he learned that there wasn't a local school for the children. So the Hoovers decided to build one. So they used their own money. They built this school. Lou went out. She found a teacher. She personally paid her salary. And the video I'm going to show you is after the school is going. I'll point Ray out to you. But you'll not only see Lou, um, but you'll hear her. And for me, it was huge. So I'm hoping you will hear her. So let's try it. Let me get to this point here. You can hear it. It's kind of low. This is Ray right here and First Lady Hoover.
And I suppose you're very proud, boys and girls, to be living in this lovely state of Virginia also. Now, boys and girls, you tell me the names of some of these mountains. What's that great big mountain? Old Rag. Old Rag. Oh, yes. Sometimes you call it Ragged Mountain, too, don't you? And what's this one right ahead?
Double Top.
Double Top. Double Top. And the one on that side? Fork Mountain. And where's my camp?
That old
Over in there, behind there. Oh, yes. That's very nice. What else are you going to tell me about this?
Okay. So, were you able to hear it?
Yes.
Yay! I'm so excited. Earlier, it wasn't working. But I don't know about you, but for me, the first time I heard her voice, I'd spent so much time researching her, looking at videos, and you think about, oh, she's from the past and so long ago. And, we're talking 100 years. When we first started talking about Lou, to hear her and to see her and to make her real, for me was really kind of threw me off a little bit. Did she sound the way you thought she would? No. What did you think she would sound like? Yeah, you detected a little bit of an accent. Yeah, that kind of threw me off too at the beginning. I wasn't expecting that, given the fact that she spent most of her formative years in California and she traveled the world. That one threw me off too, but it was really cool to see. Okay, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. But again, my contact information is up here. In case you do come up with any questions, feel free to email me. I am happy to share with you resources or to answer any questions you have. But I hope you enjoyed learning about Lou, but not only Lou's life, but also what was happening at the time and the role she may have played or the influences that women's suffrage may have played in her views of the world at that time. And again, if you have any questions, oh, did her role hurt his political career? Not that I've seen so far. No, there was and this is a whole nother conversation, but if you look into the Dupree's Tea, this was something she hosted as First Lady, and there was a little bit of backlash with that one. And so we can is another conversation, but Creek House, if you're interested, happy to send you some resources. Why is her middle name Henry? Oh, so Henry was actually her birth name. It was Lou Henry. And then when she married Herbert Hoover, that's where the new last name came in. So it became Lou Henry Hoover. Okay. And I have no ideas if she believed in unicorns. I would like to think she did, but I do not know. I have no primary source evidence to help you with that, but she's pretty
Doesn't
magical. So I would like to
doesn't
say
doesn't everyone believe in unicorns though? All right. Well, thank you very much, Bridget, for taking the time to share with us information on Miss Hoover. Thank you, attendees, for coming today and listening to this presentation. We really appreciate your participation and your very thoughtful questions today. It was nice seeing you again, Bridget, and we appreciate your time in presenting today. So thank you, and I hope to see you again. Attendees, thank you, and I will see you at another session sometime soon.
thank you. Bye.